Kirti Chandra, a graduate at Presidency University, Kolkata. I'm going to present my paper titled Problems in the Institution of Marriage. So it's an ethical paper and it maintains an argumentative structure. So first of all, I'd like you to know what are the contents that I have got in this paper. So I'll begin with the overview, of course, because there are various types of marriages which are there, and it has been ambiguously recognized across cultures and regions. So I'll first let you know what are the aspects of marriage that I'm concerned with in particular, and the form that I'm going to talk about. And when we'll begin with the main content, I'll be talking about the emergence of marriage. That is how it came into being in the very first place. And as it begins to take shape, I'll let you know what marriage is according to my research, and then how women are placed inside marriage, because the kind of marriage that I'm going to talk about, the form basically has women as a stakeholder. And then as women are placed inside this institution of marriage, then what are the problems which are there in the distribution of labor? Because we'll find out that there is a distribution of labor made inside this institution. And I'm going to talk about marriage from a social point of view. And I'm going to consider it as a social institution. So here it turns out to be a social contract. So here I will also introduce a social contract theory as given by Thomas Hobbes, who was an English philosopher. And how does marriage come in drift with the social contract theory? So moving towards the overview, as I said that I'll be talking about marriage inside the social framework and as a social institution. And the particular kind of marriage that I'm going to talk about is actually heterosexual, that is between the opposite sex, and monogamous, that the spouses are in a dyadic relationship. So let's begin with the main content. We know that historically, all over the history is divided into 3 ages, like Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic ages. So up until Mesolithic age, there was no such institution as that of marriage. Then how did it come into being? It was in Neolithic age around 10,000 years ago that an agricultural revolution took place. So even Neolithic age is further divided into Iron Age, Bronze Age, and Stone Age. So we found out that up until Bronze Age, women migrated from village to village. That is, they had the liberty to migrate. Meanwhile, the men retained their homeland and cultivated the land. So now the land that they cultivated was the same land that they acquired. So this acquired land led men to realize that they must pass on this land to someone. But whom do they pass on it to? Of course, it must be their offspring, right? So let us place offspring aside for a moment and talk about the agricultural revolution. Since the land was acquired now, there came a revolution recognized as cognitive revolution. Under this cognitive revolution, there were various cooperative networks established. And one such cooperative network is the institution of marriage, which is established between a man and a woman. Now it begins to take shape. There was a need for an offspring, and this institution of marriage, also a cooperative network, was established so that the offspring could be availed by a man to retain the land which was acquired. So individuals inside this contract are called spouses. And of course, in English, the woman is recognized as a wife and the man as a husband. And together, the spouses settle down in a patrilocal society. What is a patrilocal society? I'm going to describe it. And so would I describe the cognitive revolution. And I would press and highlight that the aim of this whole institution was to produce children. So there are a few terms that I would like to describe because these hold relevance to the paper. So first of all, motherhood. For reproduction, it takes 2 binaries, a male and a female, where a female supplies ovum during fertilization and century supplies ovum for a period of 9 months. This period is also recognized as a gestation period. And the female supplying ovum or womb is also called the mother. And the second term that I've got here is cognitive revolution. So cognitive revolution is actually a set of behavioral traits which are reconstructed, which are not natural to us. So these behavioral traits are based on abstract concepts which are collectively imagined. So these are abstract, and what is abstract exactly here? These are not natural like your requirement of food is, or maybe water is. These are abstract and not empirical, nothing physical or relevant. These abstract concepts are materialized when human beings together collectively imagine it. And once these are materialized, these are propelled as normative standards. And one such consequence of cognitive revolution was patrilocality. What exactly is patrilocality? So basically, a married couple resides around a husband's kin or the family conventionally. And of course, the offspring of the couple resides with them. And we find out that most of the neighborhood around the world is a composition of patrilocal residents, more or less. And if not now, then it conventionally certainly was. Now, what is marriage? Basically, marriage is recognized to convert an organic state of sexual urge into an administered social institution. It brings in use the collective imagination to develop the concepts like love, affection, tenderness, etc. Once again, the abstract concepts that we talked about. And there are certain roles assigned to each personality, which are conventionally identified. Like the husband, it must be the forte outside the house, while for the wives, it must be inside the house. Now, how are women placed inside this contract of marriage? So we discussed two things, right? Like women in marriage are required to produce children, and secondly, that they're subject to motherhood. So when these two are put together, we find out that normative standards have accepted women who are pregnant outside the contract of marriage as an anomaly. But again, these are normative concepts which are collectively imagined, nothing that are physically relevant or hold importance as such. So following all of this, the role of women was reduced to producing children, and they were used as a mere means to retain land. And further, this deteriorated their autonomy as individual beings, as rational beings, or this might be mediately done or immediately done, however it may be. Now, there are problems in the distribution of labor, as we talked about that there is a distribution of labor made inside this contract. But how is this distribution of labor made is actually based on facts which are not determined properly or are rather invalid. Now, first point, as you can see, in order to refute it, I have got here is that male offspring inherits most part of their intelligence from their mother. We know that heterosomes determine the sex of an offspring, and X chromosome contains relatively more genes of intelligence than does the Y chromosome. And in a female, both the mother and the father contribute X chromosomes. So that means that she inherits the mind from both of them equally. However, in a male child, it is only the mother who contributes the X chromosome, while father contributes the Y chromosome. Therefore, the male offspring inherits most part of his intelligence from his mother. So the argument of irrationality of women is completely refuted in the very first place here. Now, moving to the second pointer, the concept of hormones is actually taking shape here. We know that the behavioral differences between the two genders is associated with hormones, but is it for sure? We'd find out. So an apt ratio of hormones in males and females causes dimorphism. We know of that. And testosterone is a key male hormone and progesterone is a key female hormone. And but we cannot say that testosterone is not present in women or progesterone is not present in men, because it certainly is. And science is also still rummaging to discover whether it is, as we have conventionally accepted that competitiveness from men is expected. Now, whether it is this expectation that leads to an increased amount of testosterone, or if it is the testosterone that makes it competitive. So scientists are not still certain, but we are somehow, because historically competitiveness has been recognized as a trait of masculinity in order to retain a social status. Now, moving to the third and the most interesting one that I have got here as a discovery is that during the hormonal age, the difference is observed between a girl and a boy. A girl is likely to show advantage in social-verbal temperament, while a boy is likely to show advantage in physical endurance. However, these abilities don't last for long. These fade away as hormones become stable. Therefore, a man and a woman after puberty do not have any significant differences in temperament scale. So this still does not hold any relevance to distribute the labor as it has been done. It might seem wrong. Now, another point that I have got here, it talks about the influence of nurture, that is the environment. So there are studies which show that IQ is actually influenced by the kind of environment that you've been groomed in by 12 to 18 points. And the way women behave is actually something which is a result of the nurturement that they get, a result of the environment that they are groomed into. It's an artificially induced behavior, an unnatural stimulation, as also been talked by John Milton in his The Subjection of Women. So I'll quickly wrap up by telling you about the social contract theory as given by Thomas Hobbes. He was an English philosopher. According to him, there was a state of nature which was also a state of disarray, where human beings were not governed politically or morally. But then there came a social contract which enabled us to live life in a better way, because it protected our interest and protected us against the odds that we faced in the state of nature. And here I would also like to highlight third point, if you can see on the screen, that a social contract is established by cooperation of rational beings, which is mutually beneficial. Please keep this in mind, because I'm going to use it further and it might begin to make sense to you. And to remark once again, we remember that marriage has also been considered as a social contract throughout. So we find out that the way Thomas Hobbes has given social contract theory comes in rift with the marriage being a social institution. But how comes that? So firstly, the state of women in social contract versus the state of women in natural state of nature. So if we recall, we remember that state of nature is a state of disarray, where everything was ransacked and nothing was properly functioning. And there was threat and so on, which is claimed so. However, the social contract offers safety, security, protection. But this has not been the case in case of women, because women might have been better off in the state of nature, but when they were placed inside this social contract of marriage, their condition degraded. They are worse off in the current form of the social institution. Now, moving forward to the defense against the life-threatening attacks. So social contract theory, as I said, emerged against the life-threatening attacks that were faced by people in state of nature, but it has been just the opposite in case of women. Women have been subjected to violence, citing this particular contract of marriage. As you can see the statistics there, every 137 women are killed by a family member globally. And this is a recent report which was given by UNODC in 2019. And the second pointer states that at least 155 countries have passed laws on domestic violence, which is again a recent report given in 2020 by World Bank Group. And then, as I stressed when we were beginning to talk about the social contract theory, that rational beings cooperating for mutual benefit. Women are subjected under the contract of marriage, if you recall, citing that they are irrational. So irrational beings are never asked for cooperation. The whole concept of cooperation falls down here, collapses. And the mutual benefit as well is negligible, because there is an imbalance throughout this cooperation. So it is completely negligible. And then a contract begins to be unilateral and ceases to be bilateral, it loses its meaning as being a contract in itself. Therefore, I would like to conclude that marriage as a social contract has various problems from various points of views. So that is it, and thank you.
Thank you, Kirti, for your wonderful presentation.